Oh, there we go. Maybe I'll restart. Hi, everyone. My name is Erina Baci, and I am a PhD candidate at the University of Michigan. And I have the pleasure to introduce the amazing set of folks in our first webinar series today. Uh, Before we get started, are we screen sharing yet? Is our PowerPoint up? Not yet? Very shortly, you'll see our very beautiful PowerPoint that has a roadmap of what the rest of the webinar is going to look like today. But there we go, it's coming up. I'll just give it a second for it to load. Wonderful. So if we go to the next slide, we've got a little bit of a roadmap of what things are going to look like today. So we're going to begin with an introduction to the Explorers Club for those of you who are not as familiar, before talking a little bit about the Access program, which Nanette will explain. We're going to have short presentations from our wonderful set of panelists, and then we're going to switch over to a Q&A. So that's kind of what things are going to look like today. Just because we have lots of content to go through, I'm going to pass over the floor to Paul Tanguy, who serves on the Explorers Club Board of Directors and is the co-chair of the Public Lectures Committee. So passing it over to you, Paul. Thank you for joining us and for introducing the Explorers Club for us today.
Thanks a lot, Erina, and thank you. About 67 people online, and fun to see a few familiar names. But thanks to everybody for showing up at this in your interest to find a career as explorers. The Explorers Club, founded in 1904 by survivors of the Greely expedition and a polar exploration, and the purpose of the club is to be a common bond and a meeting place for explorers. Recognizing that when you engage and navigate some of the challenges of field work, that it's good to have friends. It's good to have social support while you do that. And also recognizing that when you come back from your field work, there's a desire to there's another person club who says the point of being first is that other people will follow. That when you come back, you want to share your story, but then that the rest that we grow so much from hearing the stories of others, and from finding purpose for ourselves in the community of other explorers. So since 1904, I should say that originally Arctic explorers formed the club, and actually the very first name of the club, if you visit the headquarters in New York, you'll see where it says the Arctic Club. But they recognize that there's something, part of exploration is kind of moving the boundaries, not only of what's looked at, but also who gets to come into the room. And so they expanded the name from the Arctic Club to the Explorers Club. And since then, the club has grown from a New York City social club to today, we aspire to be the world's leader for exploration. So an event like this is critical for that, because if you're an attendee who's seeking a career in exploration and field scientist, you are the future leaders of exploration, and the club wants to help you. The club is actively looking at how can we increase the amount of resources that we are providing to our members to help our members really define exploration in the 21st century. So I'm so grateful to the people who have put together this series, who are going to be speaking today. And most of all, I just want to say on behalf of the club, welcome to the up to 77 attendees. That's awesome. The club believes that you are the future of exploration, and we want to be a part of your journey to that. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Paul. And now we're going to switch over to Nanette, who's going to talk a little bit more about the Access program, its origin, and what we hope it will contribute to in the future.
Yes, thanks, Erina. Hello, everyone. I'm Nanette, and I'm going to provide a quick introduction to the Access program. This is a new program that has grown out of the existing mentorship program at the Explorers Club, which pairs mentors and mentees together to meet for a year. And Erina and I were paired up together in this mentorship program. And over the course of the year, we would often discuss how we didn't have family or training and how to become an explorer. But we both have had amazing mentors who have helped us access the pathways that we chose to become the explorers that we are. But so often, young individuals or first-generation students from traditionally marginalized communities lack access to the resources and support necessary to pursue STEM careers or scientific exploration. And this can come from a lack of knowledge taught or experienced on how to navigate the path to becoming an explorer. And barriers such as financial constraints and unfamiliarity with the hidden curriculum of professional development can exacerbate this access. So the Access program is made up of three core pillars: advancing careers, creating equity, and supporting success. And through mentoring, workshops, and community building, the program seeks to empower individuals who would otherwise navigate their exploration activities without guidance, and as a result face obstacles that might deter them from pursuing a future or career in scientific exploration. So by helping remove these obstacles, Access can help create a more diverse, equitable, and accessible scientific exploration community and Explorers Club. So this initiative will start with a year-long, 4-part virtual webinar series that features members and friends of the Explorers Club, of which today is the first. So we hope to develop this program further in the future and include other content and resources that help build community and enable access to a career in exploration. And through developing this program, we honor the Explorers Club motto and mission by fostering the spirit of exploration and advancing field research, resource conservation, and education for explorers and scientists from all over the world and all walks of life. So there's a lot to do, but for now, let's get started with our webinar today. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. Clare Adams, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Otago and is a field-based herpetologist, microbiologist, and molecular geneticist. Claire, please take it away.
Hi everyone. Zooming in from Aotearoa, New Zealand today. My name is Claire, and I guess I'll be talking a little bit about my journey until I guess so far. Yeah, and I've put my email on the slides, so please feel free to reach out via email or Google me or whatever. Like, really happy to have a chat. Yeah, if I could get the next slide, please. Yeah, so just a little bit about me growing up. I always wanted to work with animals. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut in the USA, as you can probably tell from my accent. And I spent my summers just running around looking at tide pools and rock pools at the beach. And then one day my dad worked in New York City and he like brought home a little baby turtle, much to the chagrin of my mom, who was in exam time and very busy. And that started my love of turtles. And I've just sort of tried to follow that throughout my career. And I was really lucky enough to have opportunities to sort of interact with local wildlife. So at the beach, we went on a lake vacation and my dad introduced me to fishing. So got a little bit of that. And I was really blessed to have access to a local museum in which I could learn more about the wildlife around me. And I had an internship at our local aquarium because in high school we were required to do an internship during the last part of our senior year. And I think that, with my parents' support, I was lucky enough to have parental support, encouraging my passions, and being able to sort of explore and get that initial love and that passion. I was able to like try and direct a career sort of in that way. So left high school being like, yeah, I'm gonna go and be a herpetologist. Like I'm gonna try and study herpetology to the best of my ability. Next slide, please. So what I did is I went to undergrad at Goucher College in Maryland. And this was a really unique college because study abroad was required. So they had actually like 130% study abroad rate. And I think that really helped open my eyes to the wider world and exploration. And I was able to take advantage of like field trips and classes, and was able to go down to Barbuda. So the bottom left picture is me taking a look at a turtle in Barbuda. And then the top two pictures are from my study abroad experience in Brazil. So I was able to do a little bit of a turtle research internship in Brazil, which was really cool, and study some herpetology down there. As you guys know, the tropics are a really amazing place to go. And of course, still tied in a little bit with the marine world as well. So looking at doing some transect work and looking at the rocky shore and hermit crabs in the bottom right-hand picture. I will also say that there are a lot of resources for undergrad. So being in an undergrad is like a really amazing part of, I think, your life. And I'm, of course, a little bit more old school. So back then and currently, we still have things like Ecolog and eVolder. So those are listservs, and they just sort of give out a ton of opportunities like every day, like, looking for master's students, PhD students, even jobs. So if you can get onto those, that can be a way to access opportunities. And of course, as you guys in the younger generation will know, like Instagram, like there's like, I don't know, Instagram listserv. So if you just go and like search for like, I don't know, like opportunities for youth and things like that, that'll actually come up with a lot of really cool opportunities. And perhaps you can start exploring getting to programs that way, including jobs and stuff that'll pay you. So you don't have to pay for taking that opportunity yourself. As well as a little bit of, I guess, my history for funding in undergraduate. So, of course, going on these programs can be expensive. Luckily, it was rolled up into my tuition, but that may not be the case for everyone. So I did apply for grants. I did some herpetology research at a local university, Towson University, and I also did research in microbiology because that was the option available to me. And we did some biofilm work and nematode work. But I was able to actually get some grants through like the American Society of Microbiology, and just saying, like, talking to alumni, talking to professors. That's a really great way to sort of tap into those resources because I know it is, like accessing things can be an issue sometimes. If I could get my next slide, please. Yeah, and so from there, I was going to be like this amazing turtle herpetologist. So I did my master's at Iowa State under Fred Jansen, in which we did a lot of turtle nesting ecology. And there's sort of where I discovered environmental DNA for conservation. It was about 2014, and the field of environmental DNA was really taking off. The idea with eDNA is, or environmental DNA, eDNA, is that you're taking DNA from the environment. So, for example, water samples. So, as your animal goes through the water, it's leaving behind traces as it's pooping, peeing, etc., mucusing. And then, as scientists, we can go in and collect that and yeah, to get an idea of what animals are there. So almost everything, every living thing has DNA. And so we can get a good like genetic snapshot of that. And so, yeah, that ended up being sort of my research trajectory. We did some of that with turtles, and that ended up being really cool. And ideally, we wanted to turn that into some sort of really cool conservation tool in the conservation toolbox. I also got the opportunity to study abroad in Costa Rica. So the graduate program every other year had a study abroad option. And I was like, yeah, like it would be really cool to do some of that. So the leftmost picture is me looking at a really big plant in Costa Rica. And the other two are from our turtle camp site where we studied turtle nesting ecology. And then if you press, I think, the next thing. And then it was 2016 and Trump got elected. And I think along with I had a really, I guess, great academic like opportunity there. But I think it was the first time I'd really experienced racism and being a second-class citizen in my own country. And I really struggled with that a lot. And I think it's okay to say, like, no, this isn't the environment for me. I'm not learning my best, and I'm happy to go somewhere else. So I thought, where is the farthest place I could go? And so I actually looked for PhD programs, actually through those listservs that I mentioned before. and one came up and it was in New Zealand. So if we can go to the next slide. So I did my PhD at the University of Otago in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I think your education is a really great way in order to be learning something, getting something out of it, and also like going and exploring. It's really cool to be able to experience a new country and a new place. And I know like if you want to go to Europe, there's Euro access. There's a lot of cool resources depending on where you want to go and explore. So I did a couple, I guess, field excursions. So one, we went to Fiordland, doing some marine eDNA, and then I had a project that was looking at seal eDNA, so trying to get this paper published about getting seal mitogenomes from environmental DNA all around the South Island of New Zealand. And I also had a project with looking at abalone. So that's our native abalone species called the Blackfoot Powa. And that was in conjunction with one of the, I guess, indigenous iwi or tribes here in New Zealand. So I was able to really gain an appreciation of indigenous knowledge systems. And that's sort of built a little bit of the foundation for some of the work that I'm currently doing now. So we had some really awesome opportunities. I'll just explain the pictures. So sampling water as the top left, and then the top right is we had a sea lion named Pebbles come and check out our work. That was, sort of a once in a lifetime experience in which the seal was trying to help us do some sampling. The bottom right is me in Fiordland. If you ever get the chance to go, it's really beautiful. And of course, we're in New Zealand, and you shouldn't just study abroad in a country and not be able to explore it. So I went on one of those Lord of the Rings tours, and this is where the fields of, I think, Pelennor, where I think the big battle happened. So it's okay to have other interests too. And in terms of funding, so, as I said, using graduate degrees to travel sort of on a shoestring budget. As you know, grad students are not paid very much, but it is an opportunity you can take if you're, I guess, willing to do that. I was always able to pay my rent and eat some food, and it was okay. Helping out and volunteering on sampling trips. I'm sure that you'll hear that your network is really important. So just chatting with people down the corridor, like maybe they've got a really cool field site and they need an extra hand, and they may not be able to pay you, but if they can pay for your transportation there, that's still a win. So networking with your department and at conferences, usually during grad school, they'll pay for you to go to a conference. So pay for you to go somewhere else and talk to people in your field and show what you've done, and maybe you can get some opportunities that way. Yeah, and I know in New Zealand, I'd just say the advice is to take advantage of road trip vacations. If you have a car, you can go and drive and usually find yourself within a few hours in somewhere that's really beautiful, and not underestimate those little micro explorations. Next slide, please. Yeah, so my post-PhD has been a little bit turbulent. I had some negative experiences during my PhD, so I was like, oh, I'm not sure I really want to like go and do like the postdoc slash professor thing. And so I ended up doing a teaching fellowship just to get some more teaching under my belt. In New Zealand, PhD is sort of a 3-ish, 4-ish year program. And you're not required to do teaching, so I wanted to get a little bit more of that under my belt. I did a postdoc in the zoology department at Otago, and that ended up being really short because it was just sort of somebody had like taken like 2/3 of their postdoc, and then they just wanted to fill in some time for somebody else. So I was like, sure, I enjoy getting paid and having a job and going out and collecting mollusks. Like, let me do that. And then I'll talk about a little bit about this, the science policy postdoc. So an opportunity came up with Antarctic New Zealand and the Ministry for Primary Industries, and this is the bottom left photo here. This building behind me is the Beehive, and it's like essentially the Capitol building of New Zealand in Wellington. And so I got the experience of going and being able to interact with CAMLAR, which is the Antarctic sort of governance for the conservation of Antarctic marine living resources. And I think, like, as somebody coming from the science world and going into sort of the policy world, that was a real eye-opener to see how policy people ended up thinking about how to use science and, the limitations and constraints that they had based on, say, their government and their mandates, and what they could do. And it was really cool working with a team of people from not only the Ministry for Primary Industries, because we were mainly interested in fishing, but also the Department of Conservation, because they were really interested in conserving all the marine life, and also MFAT, which is the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade, because they were the lead on Antarctic stuff, because Antarctica is a whole different, yeah, continent, I guess. And so being able to just take that opportunity, and there's the top right photo, and seeing sort of what international negotiation looks like when all the countries are around a table, was really, really cool. And I think transitioning into like my next job, which is a postdoc in statistics now, and I'll unpack that in a sec, like bringing that policy thought into back into science and figuring out like, okay, well, policymakers are going to think about things like this. And so therefore in science, how can we word things and speak the same language and do that knowledge exchange? Yeah, in that other way. And it's really cool to have access to that, to have had access to that like international sort of governance as well. I guess through that, they sent me to India and I was able to represent New Zealand. And I think that's a really once in a lifetime intellectual exploration experience. Um, my current job, I'm back doing a postdoc in statistics, but it's more statistical genetics. Currently, we're working with Indigenous peoples, Maori peoples here, and healthcare, trying to develop some GBLUP models in order to develop precision health and have I guess, less negative outcomes for our underrepresented peoples. And it's really cool because I do believe in the work and I'm able to explore more of that Indigenous data sovereignty aspects and understand more about how Indigenous people are thinking about their healthcare, about their environment, Tatayo, and other aspects of their life. I will say I'm still engaged with the environmental DNA community as well. So I serve on the board of the Southern eDNA Society. And I've brought a lot of Indigenous, I guess, thought into that place as well. So there's a lot of crosstalk, I think, between all these disciplines. And next, in February, I am eligible for permanent residency in New Zealand. I've been here for, I don't know, 8 years or so now. And then maybe I'll find a permanent job somewhere. We'll see what happens. But yeah, and that's me.
All right. Thank you so much, Claire, for that introduction. Next, we have Dr. Ashley Lemke, Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. The floor is yours, Ashley.
Thanks so much. This is fun. I'm having just as much fun of learning about all the other panelists as I think all the audience members are. So just briefly, I'm just gonna chat a bit like Claire did about my journey, like who I am and what I do. So I'm an anthropologist, but I mostly do archaeology. So I always describe myself as someone who works on land and underwater to explore the past. I am really interested in deep time and deep prehistory. So some of the time periods I've been really interested in focusing on and researching just happen to be underwater now. So in terms of kind of becoming an explorer, where it all began, I guess, I was just that kid that watched the History Channel all the time. So when I was really, really young, I just devoured like documentaries and History Channel shows about Greece and Egypt and Rome. And I was really always fascinated with history and the past. And I'm a first generation college student, but I also didn't know that college was an option because I had two parents who thought education was extremely important. So I grew up in Washington State and was outdoorsy, and really liked being outside, and I really liked art history and archaeology, so I feel really fortunate that I just kind of found this career that lets me be outside and also work with teams. So I went to school in state for my first 2 years right out of high school. My sister had gone to college. Like I didn't really know how to navigate some of these things we talked about, like the unspoken rules of academia. I don't feel like I had good preparation in applying for like scholarships at the undergraduate level. So I just went to the school I know. And I went up to my professor on the first day of class and I was like, I want to be an archaeologist. And she was like, great, we don't have any. So I did 2 years of school. It was at Western Washington University. And then I transferred to the University of Texas at Austin. I wanted to be a classical archaeologist. They had a really good program there. But I would describe a lot of my journey as being enthusiastic and being in the right place at the right time. So I learned about that program at UT Austin because I was in office hours with one of my professors in Washington, and one of her alumni, one of the students that had been there, came back and she was in graduate school at Texas. And she was like, if you really want to do this, I just happened to meet like in this professor's office when I was leaving and she was coming in and we chatted. And she's like, you should really go to another school if you're serious about being an archaeologist. So I transferred. I finished my bachelor degree in classics and in anthropology in Texas, and that's where I excavated for the first time. So this was sort of one of those like changing moments, like a pivot point in my career because I always thought of archaeology as being elsewhere. I was kind of, growing up on the fact that it was in these far off foreign places, and I just did archaeology in Austin. So I didn't have the money to do what we call field schools, right? Where you pay thousands of dollars and you travel to a different country to learn how to excavate. I volunteered at an excavation that was happening an hour away from my apartment. I carpooled there. I didn't have a car. I would wake up really early in the morning and drive out with the crew to be able to go and excavate at this site. And it really changed my whole understanding, and that it wasn't so much about like the stuff we were finding or where it was, but it was about what stone tools or animal bones could tell us about the people. I've just always been so fascinated about human cultures and the diversity of cultures. So I started working there, and then I asked every archaeologist I knew. I was a work study student, so in the United States, you can kind of classify, I guess. You can be eligible for work study, so you get paid and you do internships. So I worked for the state archaeology office there. And every archaeologist I could come across, all my professors, everybody that worked at the state, everyone that worked in the lab, I was like, what are the best programs? What are the best PhD programs? I know I want to do this. And at the time, University of Michigan, Erina, was at the top of everybody's list. She's a student there now. So I went to the Great Lakes region and I started working underwater there. So I got this kind of right place at the right time, really good opportunity to start working on prehistoric sites that are submerged in the Great Lakes. I've since worked in the Gulf of Mexico, and the Atlantic Ocean, and in the Great Lakes, researching submerged landscapes. So those that at the end of the last ice age would have been dry land and now they're flooded. So that is where kind of my research took me throughout my graduate career. I kind of leaned in more to scuba diving. I'm a sonar technician. I don't have a picture of my robot, which seems silly, but I'm a robot pilot, a remote operated vehicle pilot. So I always say my head's kind of in the past, but I use the latest technology to do that. Because particularly working underwater, it can be pretty challenging. So in terms of the research now, I started working underwater. I found caribou hunting sites. Our team, right? Archaeology is a team sport. We found caribou hunting sites that are below the Great Lakes. And luckily we got a grant from the National Science Foundation to go up to Alaska and talk to indigenous caribou hunters. So that's me ice fishing in the Arctic, which was really cool. We were talking about caribou the whole time, but it was winter and the caribou weren't there, so we went ice fishing instead. Um, and that really gave me a good understanding, kind of like what Claire said about indigenous knowledge and data sovereignty and traditional ecological knowledge. So now, to bring us up to date, I've been at Milwaukee, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, for 2 years. I have graduate students for the first time, which is really exciting. And I'm starting a brand new project in Lake Michigan. So it's called Our Lake, Our Science, because I think it's really important that the community tells me what they want to know about their lake and their place in it and what the community really is engaged with. So it's Our Lake, Our Science. I am bringing together people from many different disciplines, so geologists, fish biologists, archaeologists, to explore these ancient time periods. But I'm also talking to canoers and kayakers and indigenous peoples and surfers, people who spend all this time in the lake. That's like, hey, have you seen anything weird? Because to be honest, a lot of archaeological sites are not found by archaeologists. They're found by people who see something strange that looks old, and then they reach out to us and tell us what it is. So a big part of my research now is community-driven focus, talking to the groups that live on the water, that have this on-the-water knowledge. And then access is very important to me, which is why I was so excited to see this part, the webinar series that the Explorers Club is doing. I do that through virtual reality and robotics right now. So to go 50 miles offshore and scuba dive in 120 feet of very cold water is not an easy thing to do. There aren't a lot of people that do that. And I don't think students should have to pay all this money to scuba dive if they're not even sure they like it or not. So one way that our team has really focused on trying to get access is we made a virtual world. So you can go in VR and see what these lost landscapes would have looked like. We digitally drain the water out of these landscapes to say, hey, this is the animals that would have lived there. These are the plants that would have been there. These are the archaeological sites we found. So people can experience them through virtual reality. And in the last couple years, I learned that there are high school and middle school robotics teams all over the world that are making incredibly sophisticated underwater robots. So I'm working now with middle and high school students who are designing a robot for our research. So we're taking it out of just a pool where they're kind of making it for a game and directly having the students, these middle and high school students, just be part of the research team. It's something that I can't even imagine like what I would have done if I had a robotics class when I was a kid. So it's been really neat to work with them, and they are just phenomenal. They come up with these amazing ideas. Our robot is pink. Her name is Nibby, which in traditional language here means water. So that's kind of where my research is now. It's a lot of community-based, really indigenous engagement focus on exploring the past and using my role now on the Explorers Club to reach out to other people and just hear what the community really wants us to do. What the biggest thing I would say, there's two things. For scientists, we're like really good at reinventing the wheel, which is hilarious because we all know that phrase, but we all do it anyway. But particularly working underwater, like fish biologists and archaeologists never talk to each other. And we should, because I'm probably collecting data that they want, and they're probably collecting data that I could use. So I'm trying really hard to make connections, to just talk to other people. Like we say, collect the data once, but use it many times. So that's sort of my science mode right now. And then just in terms of general, like where I got to where I am and the best advice I could give to anybody is to have a positive attitude. To be honest, like I am not the best at some technical skills, but I really want to be there and I'm really enthusiastic, and that's helped me a lot make network connections and get invited to do some really amazing things like be a member of the Explorers Club. So I was just elected last year. And there's a website there if people are curious more about my research. It's got all my emails and things. But Instagram, honestly, like Claire said, it's a really good way to reach out to other scientists and other explorers. So you can give me a follow on there.
Great. Thank you, Ashley, for your introduction. Next, we have Sateesh Venkatesh, a PhD student in biology at University of California, San Diego, who studies human-wildlife conflict. Take it away, Sateesh.
Hi, my name's Sateesh Venkatesh. As I said, I'm at UCSD in California, but I'm actually in Sri Lanka right now, where I've been working on a fellowship here for the last 9 months or so, 8 months. And I think I have a little bit from both of like what Claire and Ashley had talked about, so I'll try and talk about some of the different parts, but there's a lot of crossover, I think, in kind of what we've kind of come up with and how we kind of got to where we are. But for me, I kind of had a little bit of an unconventional approach. I feel like I went into the kind of the academia side, but then I decided it wasn't for me, and then I've kind of come back to that with my PhD, but it took me a little bit to get there. So mainly I was going to kind of talk about that and kind of my journey with that and uh, kind of just different ways I funded it and found my way to different things. So talking first off is with this picture with the elephant here. Um, so my work with elephants has kind of changed all over the place in different ways. But my first opportunity kind of doing kind of wildlife conservation and getting work in the field and kind of doing conservation or talking about conservation was in Africa. So my aunt used to live in Kenya. She used to work there. So she was about to move back to India to take care of her parents. So I had an opportunity in high school to go out there and spend some time with her. And since I had a house, it was a lot cheaper. And I got an opportunity to volunteer at the David Sheldrick Elephant Orphanage. So they're a fairly big orphanage now, but at that time they were a little bit smaller, so they let me volunteer. And basically, I would give talks to the public, to maybe 75 tourists and stuff like that. That was something I wasn't expecting, and it was a really big challenge for me. I think in high school I was voted, they have like superlatives, I was voted quietest. So giving talks to 75 people that I didn't know with like about a week or two training was definitely challenging. But I found for me, talking about wildlife and animals was an easy thing I could do, and I found very comfortable doing it, and I liked doing it. And it was a good way to engage and talk about something I liked. So I was like, oh, maybe this would be an interesting thing to do kind of as a career. So I kind of was like, well, I'll just keep trying to do this thing that I seem to like and that I'm comfortable doing. So that kind of took me to my undergrad. For my undergrad, I went to a small liberal arts school in Ohio called Worcester, and they had a really good undergraduate thesis program. So I ended up doing my undergraduate thesis in kind of plant chemical defenses. But overall, my experience with undergrad was I had a great experience there with the university, but academia I wasn't really for me. I didn't do very well in school and stuff like that. Mostly testing and that kind of stuff just wasn't kind of my style. So I was like, I don't know if I want to go into graduate school. I know I like the animals and stuff like that. So I went into kind of doing field research. So the way I did that was actually I kind of found on a job board at that time a job in Thailand with a company called GVI that does kind of volunteer tourism. And basically, they partner with different organizations in the world and they do scientific research or kind of community-based research. The project I worked with was this from this picture here in Thailand. And basically, what they did was we were setting up kind of an ethical ecotourism thing for elephants with a tribal village in northern Thailand. And it sounded like a great opportunity. When I got the job, I had to check to see if it was a real company and see if it was legitimate. And basically, I worked with them for about a year doing this. It was a great opportunity. Basically, there's two staff, and I was kind of thrown into kind of leading volunteers and adults that were mostly older than me on like hikes and then designing my own research that we wanted to carry out there, but then also engaging with the community. And overall, that was kind of my whole experience working with GBI. So I ended up actually working with them for maybe 5 or 6 years or so. I think about 5 years in different countries. So with this first one, they basically paid for all of my expenses in country. I think to get there, I was like working at a pizza place for a few months and saved up some money, and then I flew out there and they paid for my expenses, but they didn't have an opportunity at that point for like a paid position. So I stayed there for about a year, and then while I was there, internally they had like some jobs, and there was a job in Ecuador that I found. And so I went over to Ecuador, and I had like sort of a paid job. It's like very low pay, but that was also a great experience. Oh, can you go to the next slide? Sorry. I'll try and jump through some of these. So Ecuador is the top right. So basically, my whole work with GBI, I bounced around through a few different countries with them doing work with different projects, and it gave me a huge range of experience on different species and different kind of people to work with. I gained a huge amount of experience, especially in Ecuador, with researchers I worked with. So I learned how to do work with reptiles and amphibians. We did mist netting for birds and bats. We did a lot of work with different insects. And then we also did a lot of work with mammals as well, which is kind of my main focus now is with mammals and behavior. But it was a great opportunity. We lived way out in the Amazon where there was no power or internet or anything like that. We didn't really have lights that much either. And so that was a great experience. After that, the project closed down, but they moved me to Costa Rica. So I worked in Costa Rica for about a year and a half, which is the picture with the turtle there. And our focus there was mainly on a project with jaguars, where jaguars were eating sea turtles and looking at kind of this conflict between species. But there I kind of took more of a role in kind of designing my own research with both monkeys and jaguars. So I kind of developed more of this kind of answering questions, working with the national park on things that they were interested in, and kind of developing things. After that, I kind of bounced around a little bit, looked for some work in different countries. Basically, at that point, I kind of got burnt out from doing work with volunteers, and kind of the company itself kind of was focused more on the volunteer side than the research side, and I wanted to move towards the research side. But I did get an opportunity to work back at the Thailand elephant place, actually as a manager. And I would say overall, it's good to have a lot of research skills, but if you want to work outside of academia, it's good to have some of those extra skills like management skills and stuff like that. So that was a good opportunity for me. I had an idea of what I would want to do with that project. So as a manager, I kind of was able to develop things on my own, learn how to manage people as best as I could, and kind of develop that project. And I was there for about, I think, another year and a half or so. And then at that point, I basically finished up there, and I decided I want to go back into doing more research. So I moved to do my master's in New York at Hunter College, where they had a program for animal behavior and conservation. Oh, sorry, yeah, that's animal behavior and conservation. And my work there, I got really lucky, and this is also kind of good place, being at the right time in the right place. One of the researchers I worked with in Thailand when I first got there, I had talked to a few times, but he actually was a professor at Hunter at that point, and he had just started recently. But he knew about working in remote places in Thailand and kind of being able to like work in remote areas. And he introduced me to another researcher that they were developing a project with at the Smithsonian. And so basically, I got an opportunity to do work with the Smithsonian, which actually funded a lot of my research for my master's, which was in Myanmar. I'm going to jump through a little bit because we're running out of time, but the next one. So that takes me kind of to where I currently am. I finished up my master's program, which was kind of with semi-wild elephants. So I went from captive elephants to captive elephants, but semi-wild, and now I'm working with wild elephants, both in Sri Lanka as my main field site, and then also in Thailand. And my focus now is on human-wildlife conflict and human-elephant conflict specifically. And I think overall, my different research and places I worked with kind of built up. I worked with both people and wildlife in different locations. And I learned this kind of connection and reliance on wildlife is kind of what I was interested in kind of diving more into. And so that's kind of brought me to what I'm doing with my PhD work, which you could go to the next slide, where we're using different techniques to study human elephant conflict, we're using drones, kind of camera traps and audio recorders. And then to what Ashley was saying, we're also trying to think of different ways of like visualizing and looking at some of the data and how we kind of interact with data and that side. So we're doing a little bit of work with VR as well. So if you scan this little QR code, you can see our camera trap set up, like a 3D object. But we're also looking at different ways that we can use our data to kind of visualize human-elephant conflict and how we understand it as well. So we're kind of using a whole bunch of different techniques to kind of build up to where we are. Yeah, that was a little bit brief, but yeah, if you have any questions, I'll dive deeper into any of this.
Thank you, Sateesh. Last but certainly not least, we have Amanda Fornal, who is the founder of Founder Buddies, Orange SFM, and Women in Exploration, as well as the director of FI Germany. We're going to do a little slide switch here for Amanda, so give us a second to transition. And Amanda, you can take over whenever you're ready.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. So envisioning a career as an explorer, I'm a little bit different than everyone else in here as I am not in academia, but my experience, as she mentions, I have 25 years of experience in technology and business consulting, a founder of a few things, including Women in Exploration, a director in an early stage startup accelerator, a coach and an advisor, and absolutely can connect with me on LinkedIn. So I'll start with my starting point. I grew up in a rural town of around 5,000 people. And I didn't have cable TV. I never had a credit card or used credit cards, never left the country, never had been on a plane. And my life, childhood life, was spent exploring the woods behind my home with my brother. And one thing I remember from growing up in this small high school is a ridiculous comment from a teacher. When you go off to college, you will be just a number. Well, first of all, who talks to children that way? No, thank you. And no one is just a number. And I believe that we can look for opportunities and really be open. And I think all of our panelists talked about looking at different opportunities and being open to them. And really, it's about embracing your curiosity. So when I turned 18, I wanted to go to college as far away as possible. And my limited knowledge, that was a 10-hour drive. So I went to Virginia Tech. And I'd say at least 50% of the reason was because one of their colors is orange. As you might have noticed, I like orange. And I was open to as many opportunities as I could find, really looking at different things. And I applied for the Disney College program, and I was really excited to go. And I remember at 3 a.m. the night before I started packing, probably should have started earlier, but I woke up my parents and I said, I'm not going. I'm sure I was nervous. I was scared. My mom said, you're going. So I did, and I took my first flight. And here is when I started learning about different cultures, as there was a lot of international students, and it really started opening my world. Then I applied to study abroad in Switzerland, and I was able to leave the country and also travel to multiple countries while there. Meeting a professor, I then took a summer studying abroad to China, Hong Kong, and Vietnam. And again, my world started to grow. When I was in Switzerland, the city that we had visited that to me was really meaningful is when we went to Prague in the Czech Republic. So after I graduated, I applied for an internship there, and then I started working there for a summer. And again, my world started getting bigger. When that was done, I did my first solo trip and I traveled around Europe. Again, my world was becoming bigger. Then I started my job in November of that year. So I had this dual path of curiosity as my business consulting with PwC, which grew into IBM. And I founded a poverty alleviation nonprofit with a friend called Bread and Water. And with this, we helped organizations all over the world. And eventually we decided to do a mini documentary on one of the teams that we were helping. And this was in India, taking kids out of child labor. And taking this trip was really meaningful for me to be able to see people living in a very different lifestyle than I grew up. And it was really an amazing experience to work with the kids specifically. So I was already in India and I said, okay, my co-founder left. I'm going to travel myself around the country and see what I can learn. And I was lucky enough to encounter a group that was studying textiles. And they had this local woman come in and show this sari to them. And it was really beautiful. And she let me photograph her. And I asked if I could go and see where she lived, if I could go to her village. And she was very kind and said yes, but of course, through a translator. And so I went to their village and I interacted with the women there. I photographed them. They brought me into their homes and gave me tea. And this started my lifelong interest in cultural markings. It was just such a fascinating experience for me because it was something I'd never seen before. So I came home and I started studying what could I learn. And I landed on really doing a deep dive in the history of tattooing in the South Pacific. After my research, I planned an expedition. I alone went and traveled around the South Pacific and interviewed people, photographed them, and really tried to get an understanding and document the cultural tattoos of 20 islands, 9 countries, and I actually took many flights to get to these locations. And again, it really broadened my world and put together this portfolio of information and photographs. But it's always learning, right? I didn't have a mentor. I only knew what I could research myself. So one thing, definitely use a lav mic when you're doing interviews. I didn't know that, right? And now I know. You might be stranded many times, many places, and there are many scary things that you might encounter. And really being aware of that and how to deal with these issues is really important. So I kept doing research in many different things while I consulted. And I had the opportunity to interact and learn from people from all over the world. And their kindness and opening up to me and sharing their culture was really quite a journey from coming from knowing nothing about any other culture. And, for example, this photo always makes me happy as it is a school for the blind and it was during their kids' recess. And I just always think of this as representing friendship to me. And I loved visiting and working with these kids. And then a friend of mine found a fossil in Iceland in a cliff. And I was like, well, that's cool. And he's like, do you want to come and photograph and film it? I said, absolutely. So not only did I get an opportunity to photograph this, but I learned how to take a fossil out of a cliff and I learned how to rappel. And it was really an amazing experience because I also got to see a midnight sun and photograph puffins. And then the Explorers Club came into it. My brother encountered the Explorers Club and he's like, hey, check this out. And I was like, what is an explorer? Because at this point in my life, I literally didn't know that term. He said, you're an explorer. I said, oh, okay, I'm an explorer. So in 2013, I joined the Explorers Club, and it is such an interesting life experience because there are people that can tell you stories every day, and you will learn from everyone. And seeing this was really inspiring because everyone has an inspirational story or project to tell you about. So that has been a great experience for me. And I continue my research in various things. As you've probably noticed, I'm definitely a generalist. And so one of the big projects I did is on love. What are the cultural nuances of love? So I did 612 interviews from people from over 75 countries, and I did those face to face. So in 1 year, I traveled to 26 countries in 17 states to get these interviews. And this for me was the most powerful thing I've ever done in my life because you are really learning what it is to be human in all these different places across the world. Yes, I absolutely used a lav mic, so I am absolutely learning from my past experiences. And then 2020 hit, and we're not flying. So my form of exploration was usually going face to face and interacting with humans and animals. And I had to go to my day job and say, okay, how can I use my technology to explore? and I founded Women in Exploration. And this platform, the first thing I did was do 129 historical bios, and we have other projects that are going to be coming up in the next years. But this was a very different type, so I'm doing exploration on history. And I started at the beginning saying you never know when these opportunities could lead you in one place, as you've seen from everyone's experiences here as well as my own. So I took these photos in the Solomon Islands in 2006. And in 2024, I received an email from a researcher telling me that some of my photos may be the only photos of these tattoos that have ever been taken or ever recorded. And it's helping a group revive tattooing in their local community. And for me, it was this very touching moment to know that I was helping people 2 decades after I took these photos, these locals reconnect with their culture. So I was thinking to myself, well, in Vanuatu, I had donated all my photos to their cultural center, and it's a similar thing where I may have been the only people taking these photos. So I Googled tattooing in Vanuatu, and I did find an article which wrote about me. Funny. And it said the Orange Explorer has taken the last photos of these tattoos in Motalava. And so for me, I think it's really interesting to see where things could take you even 2 decades later. So today, from no countries to over 110 countries around the world I've traveled to. I've been on many flights. I definitely use credit cards. I'm getting used to being stranded and alone in strange places. I always use a lav mic when I can. Still don't have cable TV. But interestingly enough, I did buy 18 acres of protected forest only 30 minutes from where I grew up exploring. Now I can explore in my backyard still. So when we talk about envisioning a career as an explorer, my world was so small. And I started this dual path of being in technology and consulting, as well as poverty alleviation and exploration. And I zigzagged between the two areas my entire adult life. And now my world is so much bigger and it continues to grow. So what's next? I'm taking my business and technology expertise and my global knowledge of culture, and specifically my interview techniques and what I learned with Love Is, and combining my startup knowledge to create a company called Elefari, which is a storytelling platform. And it's for saving culture, saving history, and even our expedition logs. So, envisioning a career as an explorer. Embrace your curiosity. I'd say that there are so many paths for us as an explorer. I've personally taken probably at least 20 of them, and I'm quite confident that there are many paths for every single one on this call, and I look forward to hearing about the amazing things that you guys will accomplish.
That was great, Amanda. And now I will hand it over to Erina, who will moderate our panel discussion and ask some of the questions you left us during the sign up. Take it away, Erina.
Awesome, thank you. I just want to say how wonderful these presentations were and how much I enjoyed hearing about everybody's different trajectories to getting where they are today. So just a little bit of an overview of what the next half an hour or so is going to look like. We had people submit questions on the RSVP, of which we received over 50. So I went through these questions and grouped them by theme, and I've created these kind of synthesis questions, one for each of our panelists, and we're going to start off with those to give folks in the attendance time to come up with their own questions. So we're going to start with the pre-submitted questions, and then we're going to open up the floor. So for the questions, please use the Q&A just so that we can easily monitor and check them. But to get us started, our first question is going to be for Ashley. So Ashley, many of our survey questions highlighted the perception that academia and exploration are seen kind of as closed. And as a first generation scholar and someone who kind of entered from the outside, can you share a little bit more about your experience navigating academia? I know you already touched on it a little bit of being at the right place at the right time, but can you tell us a little bit more about that and maybe provide some insights on if you think, for example, a PhD is the only way or to be considered an anthropologist or an archaeologist, or if someone can even be self-taught?
Yeah, thanks. This is a big, broad question. Um, I was always really struck by when I was in graduate school, a lot of the people I was in graduate school with were like, oh, my dad's a professor at Harvard, or like, or like, oh, my cousin is like a professor wherever. So a lot of people seemed to just really get it, and just kind of know that track. I would say I relied really heavily on mentors to like get me through it. I think that academia, I've never deviated from that path, to be honest. Like, right? So I had like a single-minded focus. I had the like, I'm gonna be an archaeologist and this is the path and this is what I'm gonna do. And I had the luxury, I think, of just having parents and families and friends that are like, yeah, go for it. And I didn't realize that there was like another path to do it. And so I think for me, like the mentorship part definitely really helped. I reached out to people that were in academia, people that weren't in academia. Like I knew I wanted to be an archaeologist, so I talked to archaeologists all over, that were working for the state or that were professors or worked in labs or worked in museums, because archaeology seems like there's only one way to do it, but there's actually all these different career paths, right? Like inside of that field. So I think that really helped. Um, and this is going to sound weird, but I think it was kind of a strength sometimes that I didn't know these like hidden rules of academia because I wasn't hung up on them at all. Like, I was, honest to God, I will tell you, I think the best skill that I had to make me successful in academia is that I worked retail when I was in high school and college. And that's going to sound bizarre, but I had to talk to people all the time. Like, I had that job, I worked retail. You have to talk to strangers, you have to be really good at customer service, you have to just learn patience in interacting with people. And I felt like a lot of my colleagues just didn't have those kind of soft skills. And I like love conferences. I love going and talking to people. I love going and talking to people about what I do. And I think that was like this superpower that I was like, who knew working at a cowboy boot store was going to be like instrumental to me like navigating academia. So I will say like the one part that I think a lot of people now are probably thinking in terms of this path, and then I'll wrap up just briefly, is um I feel really fortunate that I got a tenure track job in the United States, like straight out of graduate school. I have a lot of colleagues that that is not the case. There just aren't that many of those jobs that are around, right? But I wanted to do it and I just made it happen and really relied on mentors and the support of my family and friends to persevere and just get it. But that is something I think that, yes, you can absolutely be self-taught. There's a lot of volunteer organizations. There are going to be some jobs that they're going to require a PhD, but not all of them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I also worked retail and I find that really really funny. It helps. If you can survive retail, you can survive almost
Mhm.
anything.
Mhm.
I'm going to pivot quickly now over to Claire. So Claire, your work with DNA has required you to draw in other fields, for example, math and now statistics. So in that spirit, we received a lot of questions about how people with different backgrounds in math, technology, and even the humanities can help contribute to exploration. So, can you share with us a couple of thoughts on how these disciplines can be better leveraged, and what advice you would give to someone who is in those fields and may want to transition into research or exploration?
Yeah, and I think you can come from almost any background, right? Because you'll be able to take, I guess they always talk about transferable skills, from one place to another place. And certainly I think that there's, we're currently using techniques that are used in, say, animal breeding, but applying them to a health setting. And I think there's a lot of, say, in the medical field for humans, a lot that's applicable from, say, veterinary practice, but I don't see a lot of vets talking to human doctors, right? And so I think getting out of your silo and talking to people, if you have a vision of what you want to do and what you want to be, that's like amazing. That's a great place to start. And then start socializing that, start talking to people. And, even if they don't know how to get you there, maybe they'll know somebody else. And yeah, I think that that's one way to go about it. I think it's never too late and never too old in order to go and pursue what you want to do. And just, yeah, put yourself out there. I think in general, most people react really positively if you've got a vision.
Mhm.
Sorry, I don't know if that answered the
No,
question.
it did. Thanks so much, Claire. And I think that's really, really good advice. And I would just add that like this skill that you're coming in from a different field should not be seen as a weakness, but actually is something that will set you apart. Because in all of our fields, we often rely on multidisciplinary, like pulling from different fields, and that will actually give you the kind of cutting edge you need to be successful. So draw on all
Yeah.
those skills.
I think a lot of success actually comes from bridging two fields together and seeing if
Hmm.
you can sit in that interstitial space,
Yeah.
because it's likely that somebody, you can be the first pioneer doing that.
Exactly. Create the space for yourself.
Mhm.
Our next question is for Amanda. So we've received quite a few questions as well from people asking how they can get involved in exploration outside of academia. So whether it's through a complete career change, from an unrelated field like we were just talking about, or while maintaining that 9 to 5. So as our non-academic representative, and you've already talked a little bit about this, do you want to expand on something that you touched on what advice you would give to folks?
You know, find a question that you're interested in answering, right? And find out if there's an answer, right? There are books. I like audiobooks personally. So if there's a subject that I want to know more about, I will get all the audiobooks, I'll listen and then see what questions might not be answered or what I want to know more about. The example with the tattoos, it was a long time ago in 2004. So it's not like you're Googling and all this information is coming up. I was like, how can I find out more? And I'm writing to librarians. And even today, one of the research projects I'm working on, I can't find what I need, right? So I'm writing to people all over the world trying to find out certain pieces of information. And it's great because some people will write you back and you might make a new friend, and some people might not. And that's okay, right? It's about being adaptable and about thinking about what you want to answer. However, you could just say, I want to see what other people are working on and help them. And that's okay as well, right? So there's so many different paths you can take. And one example, I am working with a woman who's interested in studying food accessibility in East Africa. And we're talking about maybe doing a partner project with women in exploration so we can make sure that there's a platform where we can hear about these farmers and what they're working on. And so those are all those opportunities. Have conversations with people like me and say, hey, is this a project that you're interested in doing together or just showing it on your platform? And you never know, somebody might say yes. And if something fails, try another thing. Like that's the thing, right? I don't really look at life at failures and successes because there's just too many to deal with. So if something's not working, pivot. Adaptability in life is a very powerful thing to have. So be adaptable.
I love that. And also, I forgot to mention if any of the other panelists kind of want to jump on any of these questions, we can also do that. But one of my favorite sayings is like failure is not rejection, but redirection. So you're gonna always be pivoting through life. Um, does anyone else want to add anything to that, or should we move to our last pre-submitted question? Good to move? Awesome. Cool. So our last question is for Sateesh. So we've received quite a bit of questions regarding to finding funding and finding field opportunities. And we're actually going to have a webinar series, a panel just on this topic alone in the winter. So keep an eye out for an email about that one. But to sort of address some of those questions today, I wanted to ask Sateesh, who is our graduate student on the panel, to represent that perspective. So you talked a little bit about even self-funding yourself working at a pizza store, and I love the kind of resilience that I'm seeing here that like when there's a will, we're always finding a way. So do you have any advice that you would like to share with folks about finding and funding these interests, field opportunities, expeditions?
Yeah, definitely. I would say there's not like really a very straightforward way, unfortunately, of doing it. I think it's kind of a combination of different things, and I think it depends on where you are. I think if you're with an institution, like in academia, they usually have different pathways that you can apply for grants. Obviously, there's grants to the Explorers Club and different different organizations like that have usually grants that you can apply for. Those can be both academic and non-academic. The academic side, I would say they're kind of more formalized and you can kind of get advice from advisors and stuff like that. So for my master's work, I paid for the like tuition and stuff like that myself, just like paid it off eventually. And then my research side of that work that I did in Myanmar was with a partnership with the Smithsonian. So the Smithsonian has internal funding kind of opportunities. So they introduced me to somebody that basically had some funding that they were interested in elephants and stuff like that. So I kind of pitched my work with them. And then they were able to fund my research for like 6 months in Myanmar at that point. For my PhD work, which was what I'm doing now, we funded through a few different things. We were funded through a grant through U.S. Fish and Wildlife for our work. That's somewhat paused now. So we're kind of like looking for new funding now as well. But I also got a grant. I just am finishing up a fellowship with Fulbright and National Geographic. So the Fulbright program is a really good opportunity where you can do work. You could be an academic and you could be outside of an academic career as well. But that could fund you for about 8 months usually doing work. So there are opportunities to kind of like find funding here and there. But a lot of the time, like the 8 years I spent kind of outside of academia was partially funded mostly by working for this company that does kind of this volunteer tourism side. So it's like kind of research, kind of conservation adjacent, where they're funded through a different kind of mechanism, but I'm still able to kind of gain skills, do conservation research. I worked with local organizations like NGOs or national parks or community groups and stuff like that directly. And so you see like a direct impact on where your money is going to, where it's coming from with those kind of organizations as well. And as well, I said before, I saw there was a comment in the Q&A as well about like 9 to 5 jobs and kind of balancing those. I did find that really challenging. So there was periods where I would go back to the US where I didn't have a job. I kept going to the same pizza place and I kept hiring back for like a few months here and there, or like a year or so. And so that worked out really well, but like just trying to take jobs that you can, like walking dogs and stuff like that, I did for a while, kind of creating your own opportunities there to fund you while you're in between those positions. But also now there's a lot of like digital jobs and jobs that are a little bit more flexible on hours or locations. So use those kind of opportunities to kind of build these kind of temporary jobs. I know a lot of people that are doing kind of exploration and stuff like that, they have a typical like 9 to 5 job, and then they have opportunities or flexibility in their job where they're able to do like expeditions here and there. So it can either work in academia where that's your focus, or outside of academia where it's kind of like you have to take opportunities where you can and when you have grants and stuff like that, and maybe pop in and out of jobs. So it's a little bit less stable.
Thank you so much, Sateesh. So again, I'm seeing the where there's a will, there is a way. And one thing that I've picked up on as I've navigated is if there's a grant that you want to apply for, get someone else's grant from before and use that as your template. Reach out to your networks, reach out to your friends. Like a theme that I'm seeing from everybody is that relying on your networks, mentors, friends is a way for you to sort of build your success. So just tap into everything. So those were our pre-submitted questions, and I'm noticing that there's already quite a few questions in the chat. So we've got 15 minutes left, more or less, or maybe 10 because we do need to wrap up. So I'm gonna just quickly peruse and see and pull out a couple questions from the Q&A. So I'm seeing one of the first questions we got was from someone who's saying they work in tech, they're 30, and is it worth trying to change fields or apply these skills to exploration or science? Does anybody want to take on the question?
I mean, I'll say it's always worth using tech skills for exploration, 100% in. I mean, I am super appreciative of all of the software engineers I work with, and it really helps me build better programs, right? Women in exploration, I just built by myself. And then once I was able to bring in my partner as a software engineer, it's at a completely different level of studying and keeping history And then with my program, Elefari, the whole point is to be able to save these stories for people. And without technology, we would not be able to do that. And you can do it using very intense generative AI technology or as simple as possible, whatever that group of people wants. And I think, we've already had our other people talking about robots. I mean, I wish I could build robots. I think it's amazing. It's a great value add.
Yeah, I would say also like technology has taken a few like leaps and bounds with AI recently too. So if you're in the forefront of that or you're willing to kind of like use your current skills and jump into something new, you can be the one that kind of like finds new opportunities of where that applies to in conservation and stuff. So we do a lot of work with like passive audio recorders, which creates like tons of data. And we wouldn't be able to, I think like this year we had over like 33,000 hours of audio data. And so like we can't physically go through that like we used to do. But AI can actually add to that. And so it opens up like a whole new way of doing research and kind of looking at data and what we can gain from it that we didn't have before. So if you're able to tap into some of these new things, you can open up new opportunities. And also, I see a lot more grants and stuff like that that are looking for kind of those new innovative things that are coming up. That you'll be more likely to get grants like that if you're able to say like, oh, I'm doing something that's completely new that's only been available for the last like year or so.
I think also, if if you've had a career doing something else, like that's given you a really good foundation. Like not everything is like exploration or your job, like you've probably, also gotten a small retirement account, you can worry about money a little bit less than some of us just starting out, in our careers. And I think that's a really great place to start from.
I think too, just quickly as like inspirational story. One of my current PhD students right now is 65. And, he worked his whole career as an archaeologist, but he didn't have a PhD. And he just always wanted to do it and is doing it. So I think the age thing, like we tend to get really hung up on it and don't would be my advice, right? It's never, ever, ever, ever too late to learn something. It's never too late to pivot. Particularly if it's something you're really passionate about and it's gonna invite you into this whole new, curiosity and world.
That story makes me so happy. Thank you for sharing.
I would also
Yeah,
say it's
I love
almost
that.
an advantage to start late. Like when I went into my PhD, I went to my advisor and was like, these are the skills that I want to get a job because I was having trouble finding jobs. I was like, I want to learn how to fly a drone. I want to gain skills about writing and publishing, and I want to like learn how to start an NGO. And she was like, okay, I think we can do that within a PhD scope. And so I don't think I could have done that like right out of undergrad. I didn't know what I want to do, but I think now I can make better use of a PhD than I would have been able earlier.
That's actually a really great pivot, Satish, to one of the other questions that was standing out in the chat. So we've touched on the other, one end of the spectrum of I'm older in life, what can I do or what should I do? And I love all of these answers. It's really never too late to follow your passions. But kind of on the other side of the spectrum, we have a question from Maria from Greece, who is an undergrad, and she's very much interested in pursuing a career in aerospace medicine and exploration, but is feeling that this will be difficult because it seems like it has such high demands. So her question is, what advice would you have to an undergraduate student who wants to participate in something so big? How can they stand out? How can they set themselves up for success?
Say, look for opportunities. Maybe if you're an undergrad, you'll be being taught by professors, I'm sure, and they might have small opportunities, If you have time, try and volunteer in their lab, and try and, maybe they've got some connections as well. If you've got a very specific topic that you're interested in, they might have connections that do the thing that you want to do. So ask for that introduction. Yeah.
And go to events, right? So there are science-based events all over the world. You go into a city. I used to travel a lot, obviously, and I would just look at what's going on. Is there a lecture series? Is there a big telescope that I can go look through, right? So these are the things. If it's something that you're interested in, look at what's happening. And sometimes it might be small events and you could meet the most amazing person in the world. You never know. So again, like they said, it's about taking those opportunities and looking. And it might not come up in your first Google search, but keep looking and seeing what you can find.
And like Maria and everybody on the call, like you're already doing it. So congratulations, right? Like you being here and being in this panel is already taking the first step of, going to these events and meeting people and interacting. So kudos to just even taking this first step and coming.
I would also say with this, like the Explorers Club is a great place to look for that. There's a number of EC50s that do medical, like extreme medicine, and then there's some people that do specifically like aerospace medicine kind of work. So look them up and then send them emails. They're all very nice people. But I was talking with a student here in Sri Lanka who was also kind of at that dilemma where they were going into medical school, but they wanted to do kind of like conservation work. And I told them as well, like, tons of field research and stuff like that needs people in medicine to do work in extreme places. So like focusing on getting that, get that experience where you can, and then you can apply it to lots of different avenues. So for instance, if you wanted to go into medicine and stuff like that, you could go look for opportunities where I know like in other countries like in Sri Lanka and stuff, you can gain a lot of experience really quickly if you do some volunteer work with some organizations and they'll throw you in the deep end. But that can be really good skills that you can get where maybe they'll pay for some of your basic expenses, but you'll get a huge amount more experience than you would just maybe in the US or other places where it takes a lot longer and there's more of a formal system. Look for some of those like kind of outside the box opportunities where you're able to get field experience in different avenues as well.
I was muted. I was saying awesome. Thank you so much for those wonderful answers. I think we have time for one more quick question, and then we're going to wrap up our wonderful session today. So I have a question here from Judith. Judith is a geographer, and she's doing conservation criminology now, and often finds herself in new countries and new cultures, which is something that she really loves. But then she's thinking about her presence as a white woman and if how this relates to power structures and privilege, and she wanted to know what panelists are, or what the panelists thought on the topic of travel, structural racism, and privilege. It's a big
Think
question, I
always
know.
be safe, right? Like I ended up leaving Iowa because I didn't feel safe there, to be myself. And I didn't like the way that I was being treated by society, and I was able to find a place that was, a little bit better. And I think, you're never going to get away from danger. You're never going to get away from racism. You're never going to get away from sexism. But you can try and find environments in which you're safe.
Yeah, safety first is definitely, and I think as I've gotten older, I understand how to become safe easier, right? It's not just about taking a fighting class and knowing how to defend yourself, right? That's not going to be enough in some situations. And really understanding the culture and what is considered normal and what is considered not normal. And I've definitely been in dangerous situations. I've definitely been terrified, and I've absolutely slept with a knife literally on top of me, because in some places there's no electricity, there's no running water, there's obviously no locked doors, right? And you really need to understand that and understand what you're putting yourself into, and just again be aware of your surroundings. And I always was alone, so I also put myself in a very weird situation where I don't have someone who has my back. And so now, as that I'm older, I try not to travel to places that are so dangerous. And also, it's helpful to have somebody with you that has your back.
I think also like you mentioned in the question about power structures and stuff like that as well. I find that like here in Sri Lanka, I blend in more than I do in the US really. But there's definitely a difference between like like income inequalities and stuff like that with like local people that I work with. So being aware of that and kind of what you're doing, and then also being willing to change what you want to do. You might have spent a year planning and getting grant and everything to do a project, and then you might get there and realize that the community that you planned it with, you doesn't want to do any of those things. And then it's like figuring out what they want and figuring out how you can use your resources that you have to do what they would want to do in that community. And I think, really getting to know and understanding that and also being flexible on shifting what your viewpoint is like really essential into working with communities and really understanding them. And then also your work that you're going to be doing is going to be much more effective and impactful long term. If it's something that kind of you come in, you did what you want to do. I see this a lot with research here as well. People come in, they do their research, and then they leave, and then communities and stuff like that don't really get anything out of it, and it doesn't have any lasting effect because they didn't really understand it. They didn't really have any impact or influence in it. And I think including as much of local people's knowledge and ideas and what you're doing is really essential, even if it means changing what you're doing.
I would say that's an amazing point. And one of the things, I'm not an anthropologist, I'm just a person who likes to study humans. And so I'm okay with sharing a bit about myself as well, right? So it's not about them telling me a story, it's about us telling each other stories and really learning from each other. Where I remember being somewhere where they're like, I literally talked to a guy who he said, I've never talked to a woman before. And we had this conversation and it was really interesting. And so I ended up him bringing me home to his family and we all interacted. And it was a really interesting life experience where we shared how we were different and why in a safe environment. And that was like a beautiful moment that I'll always remember because it was different for them. And we just really appreciated each other sharing versus me just taking his story or him just taking my story.
Very quickly, Ashley, would you mind commenting from an anthropologic perspective? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I would love to hear if you have any thoughts on the question.
Amanda, I think you're an anthropologist. I'm gonna like dub you one if we have to do it officially. I think you have more experience working with many cultures than many anthropologists that I know. Um, yeah, Judith, I feel like I'm everyone's hype woman right now, but the fact that you're even asking this question, you're like light years ahead of where a lot of people are, right? Of just acknowledging the fact that you do have, this privilege and this power structure that you're a part of. I think just recognizing that for what it is and then going in with just a little bit more awareness is really helpful. I can't even tell you how many dissertations have been written about this idea, but I'm gonna look. I can't think of one that like summarizes this really well, but I think awareness and just being aware of, okay, and people touched on this too, like what the local community really wants to do, what they're interested in, pivoting in times when you need to pivot, and just acknowledging the fact that, yeah, you are benefiting, right, from power structures that exist and they're going to be different in different places. Um, but just going into it with that awareness, I think you're already, yeah, taking the right step, if that makes sense.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. And we are right at 6:30, so we're going to wrap things up. So thank you, everybody, for attending today. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for giving us their time and sharing their expertise with us. And thank you to the Explorers Club for giving us a platform to launch this program. And most importantly, thank you to our wonderful attendees who have showed up from all over the world, multiple time zones, eager with questions. We really, really appreciate all of you. We would like to see how far we can take this program, so your feedback would be very important to us. So if you could fill out a 2-second survey, there's a QR code on the screen to let us know what you thought of our webinar. And then we want to very quickly pitch our upcoming webinar in a month's time about applying to grad school. I saw that there was some questions already in the chat about applying to grad school. So if you've got questions, we got answers. Join us in about a month's time. So thank you again, everybody, very, very much. Take care and see y'all next month.